Shalom friends, welcome to another episode of A Small Sanctuary, and we are now starting with our series on the Tallit. This video will really go into the basics of what is a Tallit, what do you use it for, and what does it signify. There will be 2 more episodes appearing. The second episode in this series will deal with access and gender and inclusion of the Tallit. And then the last episode will have some practical considerations about how to engage with this mitzvah. But this episode will go right back to basics, back to the source in the Hebrew Bible, in the Tanakh, about what the Tallit symbolizes, what the significance is of tzitzit, and how we can think of the Tallit in 3 unique but equally compelling ways. So welcome, make yourself a cup of tea, make yourself comfortable, and I hope you will enjoy this learning with me today. I invite you to share your comments, thoughts, or questions down below. Whether you have experience wearing a Tallit, or you're new to it, or you're considering wearing a Tallit, it doesn't matter. I'm here to meet you where you're at. So leave your questions down below, and then I can help you figure it out alongside with me. What is a Tallit? A Tallit is actually a later Hebraic or Aramaic word that means cloak or covering. But the Tallit is actually only the material which holds the 4 corners which we need to fulfill a biblical commandment, the mitzvah of tzitzit. Undoubtedly, there are a lot of videos on the internet, on YouTube, telling us what tzitzit are and what they signify. And I like doing things a little bit differently, so I'll touch upon it, but I'm not going to go too deep into that because there's a plethora of information already available on that. Nevertheless, there are some biblical sources from the Torah that enjoin us to wear tzitzit, ritual fringes on the corners of our 4-cornered garments. So the first source is from the book of Numbers. It is Numbers 15:38, and I will leave that down in the video as well. If you are familiar with the prayer book or familiar with the prayer service in the synagogue, you will find this text also wholesale in the Siddur. It's the 3rd passage of the 3 passages we traditionally recite for the Shema. And I've got it right here in this tiny print of this very portable Hebrew Bible. And I'm getting too old to read letters that small. Luckily, I kind of know the text off by heart. And I'm going to read it for you in Hebrew and then read the translation in English, because it's also part of our liturgy and it's just beautiful to hear. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber al bnei Yisrael, ואמרת עליהם ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת. והיה לכם לציצית וריתם אותו וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תתורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אותם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם. What did I just read? Numbers chapter 15 verses 37 to 39. The Eternal said to Moses as follows, "Speak to the Israelite people and instruct them to make for themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout the ages. Let them attach a cord of blue to the fringe at each corner. That shall be your fringe. Look at it and recall all the commandments of the Eternal and observe them, so that you do not follow your heart and eyes in your lustful urge. Thus you shall be reminded to observe all my commandments and be holy to your God. I, the Eternal, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Eternal, your God." So that is our first text. We're going to put a pin in that, come back to it later. Our second text is from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 22, verse 12. And here is the text in possibly the smallest print you can imagine. גדלים תעשה לך על 4 כנפות, כסותך אשר תכסה בה. You shall make tassels on the 4 corners of the garment with which you cover yourself. Now, these are the 2 mitzvot, which are understood to be one mitzvah, the mitzvah of tzitzit. We notice that we have different words here, gedilim, which means twists or braids or cords, versus tzitzit, which means fringes. In the rabbinic interpretation, we harmonize them to mean the same thing. So don't get too distracted by that. But there is a question about what tzitzit actually look like. And many different Judaic groups have different interpretations. The Talmud codifies what tzitzit look like, how many knots and windings you get on the threads. But even this can vary from community and community. Other Judaic groups, like the Samaritans and the Karaites, who are extra Talmudic, meaning they do not follow Talmudic law, have completely different types of tzitzit as well. So there is variation, but in the Jewish rabbinic world that follows the traditional interpretations of the Talmud, we do get a range, but they all have a similar prototype of being made of these threads that are knotted and wound. But there is a difference about how many knots and how many windings that varies from community to community. I follow the Ashkenazi minhag, Ashkenazim being Jews of European descent, and the order of windings in that case is 7, 8, 11, and 13, with 2 sets of knots between each. There is a whole host of interpretations on the gematria, the numerical value of these. I am not going to go into that. You can research that and find all of those lovely interpretations, how they spell out Adonai Echad, God's united name, etc. But that is not really the point of the video. What is important to remember is that every part of this garment and of this practice has meaning encoded in it and significance encoded in it. That's worthwhile remembering. So now we have explored some of the biblical sources for the Tallit. I will, in my second video, go into the rabbinic sources, which are many and varied, where we will also look at the gender implications of the Tallit, because for many hundreds of years, the Tallit has been constructed as a male garment in rabbinic Judaism. Nowadays, for quite a few decades now, it has been opened up to all genders, at least in the non-Orthodox world, and sometimes also in the modern Orthodox world. But I'm not going to go into that today. Just know that that video about women and people of other gender identities wearing a Tallit will be coming up. What I want to focus on for this video is explain the difference between a Tallit katan, a small Tallit, and a Tallit gadol, a large Tallit, and also look at the 3 functions that I have identified for what a Tallit does in the life of a Jewish person using one. I want to look at a Tallit as 1, sacred garb, 2, as an identity marker, and 3, as a prayer item. But before we do that, back to basics. So a Tallit gadol is known as a large Tallit, and that is the shawl that we know and that we see. So this is an example of a large Tallit. If I fold it out, you'll see that it is quite large. You can fully wrap your body in it, and the corners are adorned with the fringes, as you can see. The Tallit katan is a small undergarment usually worn by men, but increasingly more often by women and people of other gender identities too, and that can come in a variety of different styles. The Tallit gadol can also come in a variety of different styles, and it can be made of many different materials. This one is made by tzitzit, which is a small business of women who make a Tallit katan that fits a woman's body, which is actually pretty rare. So this is kind of unique in the Jewish world, but I have one. So in this case, the beged, the garment, is a tank top. You also get t-shirt styles that are worn by men. Technically, women could wear those too. Or you get more traditional formats where they're made of wool, cotton, or mesh. This one is a tank top, and in order to be four-cornered, the side seams are split open like this, and they have to be open more than halfway, which this definitely abides by. And then you see the corners, they have been reinforced, and the tassel is attached as such. And you can wear this under your clothes like any other undergarment and fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzit that way. A tallit katan or tallit gadol fulfill the same essential mitzvah, but the blessings are slightly different. For a tallit gadol, you say lehitatev batzitzit, to wrap oneself in tzitzit, because you're wrapping yourself in the garment. For a tallit katan, you say al mitzvat tzitzit, for the sake of the mitzvah of tzitzit, because you wear it in a slightly different way. But both fulfill the essential mitzvah of tzitzit. In Orthodox Ashkenazi customs, it is customary for men, because in those communities it is men, to wear a tallit katan from when they're about 3 years old until they get married. They only start wearing a tallit gadol when they get married and they stand under the wedding canopy, under the chuppah. In other Jewish communities, Mizrahi and Sephardi Jewish communities from the Middle East or of Spanish descent, Portuguese descent, they will wear a tallit gadol, the large tallit, from their bar mitzvah age onwards. In the non-Orthodox Jewish world, we have dispensed with that tradition of not wearing a tallit until you get married. And if the synagogue or the family or the community is egalitarian in practice, then boys and girls or mitzvahs of all genders will wear a tallit as soon as they come of age and become responsible for the mitzvot at age 13. That is how we do it in my community. My children will receive their first tallit when they turn 13. I have made them kiddie tallitot so that I could get them accustomed and intrigued about the mitzvah. But they are not in fulfillment of the commandment yet, because technically they are not yet obligated in commandment. But l'shem chinuch, for the sake of education, you can absolutely give your children child-sized tallitot, whether they are the scarf type, the shawl type, or the undergarment type, in order to foster a love of or familiarity with the mitzvah. Now I would like to go back and discuss point 1, the tallit as sacred garb. What is a tallit? Is it fashion? Is it a ritual object? Or is it a little bit of both? As you saw in the trailer video for this series, you can have tallitot that are very resplendent, and I will be talking about that particular tallit that I got for my 10th year anniversary of being a rabbi. But tallitot can come in all sizes and shapes and colors. There are some minimal requirements, and there are different interpretations about which materials are acceptable or quote-unquote kosher for the tallit. Some authorities, which are very stringent, only hold that wool or linen are acceptable, although you cannot mix wool and linen together. That is a prohibition called sha'atnes. Other authorities hold that silk and other natural fibers are acceptable, and other authorities hold that synthetic fibers are also acceptable. So if you are making this determination for yourself, I encourage you to consult with whatever rabbi or rabbinic authority holds value in your practice of Judaism. That is always the advice for this channel, to follow your own denominational practice, or if you are not attached to a denomination, what feels most authentic to you. Given that a tallit is a little bit of both, it is both a ritual object and it is a sacred garment. At the end of the day, going back to Bible times, a tallit wasn't a distinct garment. People didn't really have that many garments. It was incredibly expensive to weave cloth. And so your tallit was your cloak, your garment, your covering, your blanket, and perhaps in some sense, your prayer or your blessing item that you would use for sacred purpose as well. And what differentiated a tallit from just any four-cornered garment were the tzitzit, the fringes that were attached to it, and the tekhelet, the blue thread that was interwoven with that. After the Roman exile and the destruction of the temple and the decline of Jewish autonomy in the land of Israel, the blue dye that was won from a mollusk harvested on the coasts went into decline. This is a very expensive dye. I will go into that a little bit more in another video maybe. And it was harvested from a little sea snail, and this went into decline. This is the same dye with which Roman senators would dye the hem of their toga, and it's the origin of the expression royal blue. Depending on how you treat this dye chemically, it can be either red, purple, or blue. So for almost 2,000 years, this dye, this tekhelet, this blue thread that the Torah mandates, had fallen into disuse. Through recent DNA testing and archaeological research, organizations like tekhelet, and I will link them below, have recreated the source of this dye and rediscovered the particular mollusk responsible for producing it. And you can, in fact, get tekhelet for your tzitzit. Keep in mind, it is still pretty expensive, and it is not considered obligatory. It is an extra, it is a hidur mitzvah, a beautification of the mitzvah, but it's not seen as a requirement yet because rabbis understand that this incurs quite a cost for Jews, and we are cognizant of that. So halachic authorities do not mandate the use of tekhelet, although you're certainly free to splurge and incorporate it into your tzitzit. All throughout antiquity, from the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the late antiquity, people routinely wore four-cornered garments, and so the tallit remained relevant to fashion and custom as an actual functional garment. Think of the Roman toga, think of the Roman pallium. So it was very normal for men, but also for some women, to wear a tallit in antiquity. Once the early Middle Ages came onto the scene and we started tailoring clothes, the four-cornered garment, the piece of cloth taken from the loom, started to fall into disuse. And that is when Jews, in order to not lose the mitzvah, developed the tallit as a separate garment like we know today. And that is the origin of the tallit as a sacred garment and a ritual object. Technically speaking, any Jew who considers themselves obligated to wear tzitzit, to wear ritual fringes, is obligated to attach them to any four-cornered garment. If you buy a poncho and it has four corners, you technically should apply tzitzit to them, unless you round off one of the corners. So that's a little fun fact. And of course it begs the question in our modern world, to what degree do we want to carry out our Jewish identity publicly or privately? And we will revisit that too. This is a good segue into point number 2, which is the tallit as an identity marker. It was an identity marker for the ancient Israelite back in Bible times, and it continues to be an identity marker today. For some people who wear a tallit katan under their clothes and who wear the fringes out, it's an identity marker in the general world that we live in. And there are a lot of questions about, should you wear them out? Should you wear the fringes in? How safe do you feel? There's a gendered component here. There's a concern about anti-Semitism. There's a desire to share and proclaim one's Judaism. All kinds of competing ideas at the core of this. But it is an identity marker. And even when worn in the relative privacy of the synagogue, it is a public garment that communicates something about the identity of the wearer. Namely, that the wearer is Jewish, that the wearer is covenantally engaged with the Jewish covenant to whatever degree the wearer identifies for him or herself, and that the wearer is bound in radical equality and dignity with all other Jews wearing the tallit. Not only is a tallit sort of an ethnic identity marker, I am Jewish, I am part of the ethnos, the ethno-religion of Judaism, and the covenantal community of Judaism, whether by birth or by choice. But it also signals something about the radical equality that each Jew is commanded in this mitzvah. Not just Roman senators, not just princes, not just kings, not just royalty, not just the wealthy, but everyone can fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzit. It's important to remember that in ancient times, when cloth was very expensive, it was seen as a luxury to have a fringed hem on any garment, or to have a garment that covered more than the basic minimum of the human body. Add to that the tekhelet, the blue dye that was very costly, and in a way, the tallit and the tzitzit came to symbolize the power of proclaiming all of us as royalty in a radically egalitarian way. God is our sovereign, and we are all princes and princesses before the sovereign God. That is kind of the imagery that the Bible plays with. The last point is the tallit as a prayer item. If you wear a tallit katan, it is not necessarily a prayer item. It is an identity marker and the fulfillment of the mitzvah. If you wear a tallit gadol, it does become a prayer item. And it's not just about a kind of passive fulfillment of the mitzvah of tzitzit, but an active engagement with tzitzit as a mitzvah conducted during prayer. When we recite the passage from the book of Numbers, for instance, we kiss the tzitzit. Every time the word tzitzit is mentioned, we take the fringe and we kiss it out of deference to the mitzvah. We may put the tallit over our heads during the Amidah or other key junctures of devotion in the service to heighten our concentration and to signal that this is both a public act through our declarative purpose of wearing a tallit, but also a private act of personal prayer and kavanah, sacred intention and meditation and contemplation. We might feel comforted by our tallit. Our tallit journeys with us through the Jewish year, through the Jewish week, the day even. We wear them at the high holidays. We wear them when we are happy. We wear them when we are sad. We wear them through joy and through all of life's emotions. Many people will wear them when they bless their babies into the Jewish covenant and wrap their children in a tallit, for instance. And ultimately, when a Jew passes away, and if that Jewish person wore tallit during their lives, they will be buried in their tallit as well, with one of the corners snipped off to represent the invalidation of the tallit, because now this holy vessel of the human body is a broken vessel as the soul has passed on. So it is also a prayer garment, and we can toggle between these modalities. There is something very countercultural and beautiful, eternal and timeless about the tallit. Some concluding thoughts for this video, and also a little anticipation of what can come next. The tallit is a statement piece. If there ever was a fashion term, statement piece would be the word that comes to my mind. It is intentional, it is declarative, it is soothing and spiritual, and it communicates something about the Jewish theology where every human being, and in the covenantal context, every Jew is created in the image of the divine. It represents the divine presence. It represents inclusivity. When a person converts to Judaism, that is often the time when they start wearing a tallit, or they are wrapped in a tallit as part of their blessing ceremony. And I will talk a little more about that as well. As I mentioned before, someone upon their death or upon their birth is wrapped in a tallit. The tallit figures time and again. The wedding canopy is often a tallit, symbolizing the Shekhinah, the feminine indwelling presence of God that shelters all of us. It represents shelter, comfort, safety, spirituality, connection and covenant, identity and community. And it is both a communal garment and a personal garment. And for each Jew, it can have a little bit more of this and a little bit more of that meaning. And we are all on a path to make our own meaning at any given point with this beautiful ancient garment, this mitzvah that is over 3,000 years old and that has sustained Jewish practice so much that Jews took extra care not to lose the mitzvah when we stopped wearing four-cornered garments. So I hope you enjoyed this kick-off, this first episode on the Tallit from an egalitarian and spiritual perspective. Next episode, I'm going to be talking about gender and Tallit. Why is it seen as a male garment? Is that actually true? What do the sources say? I have so many sources for you. How can we reclaim it as an egalitarian garment? And is that forbidden? Hint, no, it is not forbidden. How do egalitarian communities navigate the Tallit? And moreover, as a woman, I want to give people of all genders encouragement to wear the Tallit and to do so with joy, pride, and dignity. So that will be coming up next. Remember, if you have comments or questions, leave them down below so I can answer them. I look forward to the discussion, and I will see you for the next episode. Shalom uvracha, with peace and blessings from my bayit to your bayit.